Thank you, everybody. We're still here at the CZI Annual Conference, and we're discussing all things strategy, scenario planning, as well as, the panelists have been very interesting, very exciting. And thanks to our sponsors, Delta, BAT, Keflos, and Old Mutual. This has been a phenomenal conference, and I think that the institution CZI is actually growing. We've got someone who has been, listening to what everyone else has been saying and has been attending this for a very long time. A friend of the show, Chipo. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Yeah.
What a great conference it is at CZI.
Yeah.
Very different. I think the way it's structured is so different. I mean, they started last week. I'm sure Sekai has already told you.
Yeah.
With some session. I didn't attend, but I would have wanted to attend the session on sustainability.
Yes.
I hear it was a great hit with others who are wanting a bit more. I'm one of those who would want to.
Well, you can listen. More. You can listen to some of what the panelists talked about on sustainability on Friday Drinks.
All right. Yeah, I'm very interested. And then today, the session earlier in the morning on strategic perspectives. Wow. You think and then you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And then you need to unpack the way you do strategy, the approach, the scenario planning. I think it's the scenarios that really made an impact on me. We normally do strategy and you just end and you say you've got a great strategy. But you never really go deeper to say what if.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the what ifs that are so big, issues around globalization, issues around, so
those
many
are the
things,
blind
climate.
spots.
There are so many blind spots now. So I think that was really very relevant for today.
Yeah, Nina is great.
Yeah.
She's
wow.
phenomenal.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
I would like to spend a bit more time with her. If she's still around.
I'm well, she also came on the show, so you can listen.
Did?
Yes,
that's
so
nice.
you can listen to, a very interesting scenario that we brought up as a classic example was, what if gold price continues to go up? Or what if also gold price come down?
Yes, which is what we don't want to listen to. we did a group discussion and we then said, what if gold price crashes? Oh my God. We didn't want to
we don't want to talk about it.
Because right now we are all on a wave, aren't we?
Yes.
Gold is
pumping.
Good,
But don't you think that if you look at the scenarios, that's also a perfect time for us to explore more? That if the prices are high, if we do a lot more exploration, we get more mines going, then even if the price comes down, we've increased our capacity. We're now doing maybe 100 tons or 200 tons. So when the price comes down, at least the turnover will still be high enough.
Certainly, and I think it's a time where we can reflect what we can do more for the populace of Zimbabwe, not just for any other investor. I know we are very welcome to foreign investors, but one tends to think that with this wave of gold, we really need to have more of our people in that value chain and really doing much more. So yes, it's an opportunity, and I hope those that can are seizing the opportunity in the moment now.
Yeah,
the
fantastic.
moment is now. And you never know what happens.
True. So you've been part of you were in private sector, then you ran a parastatal. Are we at liberty to say what the parastatal you actually ran?
Of course.
So tell one.
Yes.
Tell us your experience going into a parastatal, especially coming from private sector.
Well, I think the thing that hits you hard is that the systems are there on paper. Or maybe in computers or wherever. The systems are there. But I think it becomes weaker on implementation and also the skills. The skills might not be as visible. There may be skills hiding somewhere within, but it just is like the presentation that I'm just coming out of on human resources, where perhaps there's so much sometimes bureaucracy or the layers are a bit too much, so much that you don't see where the talent and the skill is. And you really need to work through in deep in the organization to start getting out the talent, getting out the skills. I think that's one of the things. Obviously, governance is a big one
Okay.
for parastatals, but I think there's been a lot of developments in the recent past that are really making sure that there's a bit more streamlining on governance. But I think governance is a big issue. You know how boards are structured, how boards conduct themselves. Definitely, I think in the public sector, it has been a bit more problematic than in the private sector. In the private sector, you know that you have your boards every quarter, and that you relate to your boards on strategic issues. Sometimes in parastatals, some of the matters are not so strategic, and it becomes very problematic. But I think that therein is the opportunity for anyone who goes into a parastatal to really delve into these issues, not from a position of saying you know it all, but from a position of saying let's collaborate and let's do a learning experience. The board, management, executives, and everybody else, and then start realigning what is it that you should be bringing onto the boardroom table and what it is that you should be bringing onto the executive table, and then operational matters.
Well, the problem is in Zimbabwe, well, the perennial problem that we find in Zimbabwe is every time we have a new minister, he comes with, or she comes with a new board for the parastatals. So there's no continuity. Why is that? Why is that a problem?
That's very unfortunate. I actually don't subscribe to that. But, you know, they now have the act. It's legislated in the Public Entities Corporate Governance Act that you don't have to fire the entire board unless there are adequate reasons why. And those reasons have to be really valid, and you have to go to the head of state to be able to fire the board. So I think you are seeing less and less of that, hopefully. But one of the issues definitely is the lack of continuity when a board is fired, the lack of vision, the lack of leadership in certain issues, especially the strategic matters. So that, I think, has to be addressed.
So
that has to be addressed.
One of the interesting things that I've noticed over the last 5 to 10 years was certainly 10 years ago, there was a crowd that worked in the parastatal space, and there was everybody else who worked in the private sector. And it was very rare for somebody who you had to be incredibly brave if you found success
Like me.
in the private sector to go and work in a parastatal. But now it's kind of cool. I know so many people who've made that transition from the private sector to the parastatal space. And so what's changed? What has the government done to make it more palatable for people from the private sector to move across to work in state-owned enterprises?
I think firstly is the legislation, like I said. There is now clear legislation. There is now clearer roles to be played by various levels, from the principal to the board to the executive. And also I think the emerging role of the state entities in this economy can never be underscored. You look at most of those entities, they are actually very, very significant to the economy of the country, probably big enablers. I was in telco. Telco is big. I mean, we're bringing in optic fiber connectivity across right across the country, and also connecting with the outer borders. So that is big. And to play a role like that I can't do in the private sector, to me, I think that was a big inspiration for me to join. And, even looking back, obviously we did not solve all the problems, but you can look back and you say you made impact. And this is actually, I think, one of the major issues that is driving a lot of people to say, wow, I want to be relevant. I want to be counted, to be a voice of change, a voice of positivity to the country and to the economy. Because, one of these days, when we are all old and looking back and playing with our grandchildren, we don't want to be asked, what did you do when these things were not happening? You don't want to be the storyteller of just telling bad stories. You want to say you were part of the game, but for change, for positive change. And I think that's what we should be doing.
Okay. I was going to say it's the problem of unemployment.
Well, yes, partly, yes, and also unemployment. It is there, but
you will hardly. The parastatals, the last time that they retrenched was, maybe in the early 90s during ESAP.
Well,
so there's job security. You know that once you get in, you're not gonna be retrenched, or the company's not gonna close off.
Not necessarily, but there are certain parastatals that have actually downsized, but not in a significant way, I have to admit. But definitely, it's a conversation that quite a number of them have to do, because they have to be also streamlining to efficiency. They can't be just there by themselves, being big employers without necessarily providing the service, without necessarily bringing on the profits if they are supposed to. Yeah. So it's a big conversation.
So the other thing that I actually wanted us to talk about, and I think you're in a very good position to make us understand why there hasn't been any privatization of our parastatals. Why has that been a thorny issue and it just hasn't happened? And yet, if you look at the president, he was big on privatization. If you look at government processes and what they've actually said in their policy pronouncement is they want to see privatization, and yet it just never happens.
Well, I think it's a process. It's a process, and as state entities, the state entities have got lots of stakeholders, unlike private sector. So in private sector, you sit in the boardroom and you say, yes, let's do this. Let's go onto the stock market and do this and do a rights issue, and it's done next week or whatever, the following month. But I think for most state entities, you really have to go through processes and through various channels to get buy-in. And who is the promoter of such initiatives like privatization is another issue. So I think it will come. It is coming. I've heard whispers or discussions around issues around privatization. It will come, but obviously it's a process where we need all the stakeholders on board. And it's actually a process to just ensure that all stakeholders...
Could you give us an idea of when you say managing stakeholders? We have no idea. So we often think that there's just one major stakeholder, and that's government. So when you say stakeholders, what does that actually look like?
But government is a huge organization in itself. It's not just, for example, from where I'm coming from, you work with a parent ministry, who is Minister of ICT. But Minister of ICT might not be working alone. You have to be working with maybe Minister of Finance in certain issues, perhaps even going on into legislative issues. You may need to be consulting Attorney General. You may be needing to consult other, departments, which then come in. So you find that I know that at some stage there was something like a cabinet committee on the privatization of our entities. And so it then meant that whatever cabinet committee is there, they also have to filter down into their various ministries so that everybody runs with it. I'm sure it will happen. It has been a process, as I say, and it is a very good opportunity for raising money. I think the other thing that has blocked privatization are legacy issues. For example, debt overhang. A lot of these entities have got legacy debts, which have to be cleaned up from their books before they can be ready for new capital. So those are some of also the discussions, and a bit technical, I would say. So there's need for looking at all those issues and say when can be an entity ready. But I'm sure there are those that will come on board pretty soon.
All right.
When I say pretty soon, maybe it's 2 years, maybe.
Okay.
in
All right.
24
Okay.
months.
Well, look, I think we're seeing some positive developments in that
Yeah.
space. There was an announcement, I think, earlier this week of the city of Harare, privatizing its water. So I think
which
this,
is good.
That's
the
good.
mindset in government is changing in terms of its attitude towards privatization. We also saw a build, operate, transfer arrangement, I think, for one of the roads. So I think the private sector is going to play a bigger role going forward. Obviously, for us, it doesn't.
It's too slow.
Yeah. I think when you are looking at from a private sector perspective, it's very, very slow. But like what you are saying, I think there's a lot of work that's happening in the background in the meantime. And what we should be seeing is an acceleration of such announcements or proclamations that this entity is going to do BOT or whatever, going on to the stock market or whatever they would do. I'm very, very positive that these things will start happening.
Okay. We were told our time has run out, but one last question.
Yeah.
For somebody who's starting out a career in business or as a parastatal or trying to navigate, what would be your best advice for them?
Well, be knowledgeable at what you are doing, but also maintain your values. Professionalism, integrity, I absolutely must. Don't compromise on your values and just stand firm with those values and you'll do well.
On
Fantastic.
that very positive note, thank you very much. Very wise advice. And to our viewers, I hope you've learned a bit as much as I have. And thank you very much to our sponsors, BAT, Careflows, Old Mutual, and Delta.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, do I say cheers with water? Yes.
Yeah, that's it. That's good enough.
Okay.
That's good enough.
Cheers.